Welcome back. Another week. Cornhusker Connection. I'm Brandon Shanahan with Tyler Sprinkle and Brooke Byrne as always. Week 0. We got football going on this week. I think out of just my therapist's recommendation, I'm not watching any Week 0 football after what happened last week, especially, or after what happened last year in Week 0, especially any games happening in Dublin. No, thank you. But we do, in fact, have college football this week, so that's pretty great news. And that means that at worst, we're a week away from getting real football.
Yeah, 10 days, 10, 11 days, because that
We're
Thursday.
there. We're getting started. I'm hyped. But lots of good stuff going on right here on Cornhusker Connection Network. So a lot of good content coming out this week. I'm going through conference by conference, breaking down each team schedule, predicting every game for every seat, for every team, for every conference. So I will come out today. All 5 Power 5 conferences, then a special 6th championship edition where I talk about postseason. Which I think is the best way to do it, because I think a lot of people who do like full season predictions will look at a team like, well, they look like a 10-win team, or they look like a 6-win team, and then make the numbers work from there. But there's so much context that goes into what happens in a college football season. So lots of good stuff there. New show coming on the network here in a couple of weeks. Bookie, Brooke, and the boys. Degenerate gambler Brooke Byrne will take us through that journey. Win us some money, lose us some money. I've also found my way on Craps TikTok, which is giving me the itch. Get back to a casino, so I'm juiced about that. But lots of good stuff going on. Next week, the season starts here for Nebraska. We're revamping our content. We're essentially going to have like a post-game and a pre-game show, at least 2 shows a week, depending on how much content we can put into those. Obviously, the pre-game show will start with all things Huskers, breaking down that entire matchup. Essentially, the goal is to have that be your replacement if, say, hypothetically, you don't want to watch Lee Corso at 97 years old play dress-up. We got you covered there. Then Monday, you can expect a nice post-game reaction from us, eating our feelings, talking about that, talking about all the bets that we lost thanks to Bookie Brook. So lots of good stuff going on. So 2 episodes a week there, an episode of Bookie Brook and the boys. Plenty of content throughout the week on our YouTube channel. So you got plenty of us if you want us.
We're also going to have Brooke teach me how to bet. So any new bettors out there, this will be your spot.
He's a good teacher. I can attest to that. You know, and another thing about sports books is I feel like they're getting cocky, in the sense that I feel like I was getting way better odds back when sports betting was illegal than now that it is legal. I feel like they're juicing the odds a bit. Have you noticed that?
I mean, there is a power struggle there, but at the same time, all of them are greedy. So on one site, you may get a little bit of a better number than another. So I guess, I mean, it depends how much you want to put into it. If you want to shop around and get the best number possible, you definitely can. Or if you have like one you like particularly, it's the difference of, a couple bucks or however much you're betting. It's not a huge difference, but dollars add up. So
that they do. So we got that going on. Got a QR code in the corner. Just figured out how to add that to the broadcast. We're really up in our production value here. I got the Cornhusker Connection logo in the corner there. So we're looking like a real operation here. Tyler finally got an upgraded camera so we can see his beautiful mug. I mean, lots of good stuff going on. First thing I wanted to get to, and something that I've been meaning to bring up since we are all Omaha raised fellas. But I keep forgetting. Shout out to Bud Crawford. How fantastic was that fight against Errol Spence Jr.? I mean, absolutely historic stuff going on, and he's never been afraid to rep the 402, which is electric.
That was the first fight in a while that I was truly nervous for going into it. And if you know anything about Bud and how he fights, he normally starts really slow. So when he started landing some shots in the second round, it was like we knew it was over. So
it was over. Well, first of all, I thought it was over as soon as he walked out with Eminem. That's a wrap.
Yeah, it was electric. It was a crazy experience going to watch parties. Everybody's always It's nice that to have everybody just rooting for the same guy. Like, there's nobody in the
Yeah.
corner like, oh, Errol Spence. No, fuck no. It's Bud Crawford or die here in the 402.
Yeah.
So I'm stuck here in Dallas, and I was well. First of all, option A was well, how do I get to Vegas? How much are tickets? Okay, I'm not going to Vegas. And then I couldn't get up to Omaha to watch it. And there's a sports bar themed bar right down the road from my house that's like specific boxing. Like I remember we went down there to watch the Florida State LSU game last year, and then they turned it off in the third quarter for a pay-per-view boxing match, just to show you like the energy in this bar. And I was like, oh, well, that's perfect. I'll just go there. And then I remember that Errol Spence Jr. is also from Dallas.
I
So I'm like,
was
I don't
also
think
in
that's the spot for me.
Dallas for that fight. It
Yeah.
was.
I mean, because and the final straw to like just getting it on pay-per-view at home is if I was an Errol Spence Jr. fan and I was as juiced about him as we are about Crawford, and I saw him get his fucking teeth kicked in like he did, and then you have little old me chirping everybody at the bar, I I would not be a good time. I was like, I don't want to dampen anybody's heartbreak even more. I'll just celebrate from the confines of my own home.
Definitely with
Holding
combat sports, you have to watch, getting a little too excited. I was down in Dallas for that too with a bunch of Omaha guys, and we ended up watching it at an Airbnb for that very reason. Like, it's probably a very pro Earl Spence crowd
Yeah.
anywhere we go. So,
And Showtime has like their Inside Access show that I've been binge watching just for this fight. They released about a week ago, like the final episode of this fight, like on fight night, and it was so funny to see all the Cowboys players that were back in Spence Jr. because there's always that shot in the Cowboys postseason game that they end up losing, where it's like it goes to a Cowboys fan in the crowd and they look equally disappointed and equally in disbelief. And so it was so fun and refreshing to see that same shot with that same expression and emotions, except now it's Micah Parsons. So I thought that was fabulous.
Football season comes early for the Cowboy haters.
Absolutely. But just what a historic night. First fighter to ever hold 4 belts in 2 different weight classes. First ever undisputed champ in the welterweight division. And just an absolute dog in there. Not competitive at all. And Errol Spence was a top 5 pound for pound fighter coming into that. Top 3 in some publications. And just not playing the same game.
and it was like everywhere I was looking for predictions on that fight, I saw Tank Davis on a podcast go, I have Earl Spence by knockout. He goes, Bud can't take a punch. Uh, Spence knows what he's doing. He's a better fighter. And a lot of people are thinking this. I mean, maybe it'll be closer than I think. And, man, were a lot of people wrong.
I mean, I was wrong. I was expecting it to be way closer than it was, but holy smokes, dude, it wasn't close.
Yeah. And then in the middle of the fight, I don't know if a lot of people caught this, but to look out at Charlo and say, you're next.
Dude.
That got me hyped.
And now he's calling him out on Instagram. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Dude, electric.
I mean, if you're him, there's nobody that scares you now. I don't think.
No. Well, and I mean, you got to think like if you're as big of a competitor as Crawford is, you got to go up and try to get one of these bigger guys now, because there's no way you can step into a fight with another welterweight after tearing down Spence like he did.
Well, he's been trying. He's been trying for a long time. Nobody will fight him.
I think Charlo, they were talking about him going up to either 154 or 160 and fighting him there. So I think the plan is for him to go up a little bit.
I think so. Yeah, there's that rematch clause that Spence could trigger, but that would also probably be at 154 anyways.
Yeah.
And then, if it's not that, I mean, if he's just collecting belts, all the weight classes, he'll be 47 years old fighting for the World Heavyweight Championship of the world. I can't wait.
It's going to be a blast.
So great stuff from Crawford. I mean, I've never been a boxing fan, but I mean, seeing the Omaha fella just tear it up is just it brings a tear to my eye. It's so special.
Yeah, great way to represent.
And then other media going on, the Johnny Manziel doc out. I had a blast watching. He's probably my favorite football player of all time that I've gotten to watch. Just electric on the field. Somehow seems like it was even more dysfunctional than was led on, which is insane to think about. But what did you guys think?
So Tyler and I were talking. I actually watched it for the second time with him. It's crazy. Two things that stuck out to me. It's crazy how Sumlin and Kingsbury let that kid do whatever he wanted to do, whenever he wanted to do it, with no control over him whatsoever. And then
ridiculous.
The second thing that stuck out to me was that the 19-year-old kid, his like business manager, air quotes, started the rumor about his family having oil money, and the media just ran with it without like fact checking it. And when you tie that in with the whole Manti Te'o situation that happened in the same time frame, it's like, what were media personnel back then doing? Like, not fact checking anything. Like,
I mean, I think it was more of, that's a believable enough story. This kid is crazy good. Let's just not look too far into it, I think.
But I also feel like it's a very easy thing to fact check.
Yeah,
especially the oil money. Like
just very
Google
specific. Yeah, like all it would take to find out is anyone in his family have ties to oil?
Yeah,
and I don't think they did. So
2 seconds on LinkedIn will get you all the answers that you need. The Manti Te'o thing would be, I think that would be a bit more challenging to properly vet. Well, not really.
Yeah,
not really.
Name, like you could easily find an obituary somewhere. So.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of. Like, obituaries are pretty easy to find.
Yeah,
I find them by accident when I'm Google searching myself.
That's a problem.
I was like, oh, did I die? Oh, okay. No. This guy, it's a different brand, Shanahan. Whoops. But that'll get the adrenaline going a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I can't believe how unhinged it was. Just seeing, well, like you said, seeing the coaches just let him run wild. But also, like, what do you do? He's that transcendent of a football player. Like, he can't.
No, Tyler pointed it out to me. It was like his dad on the dock said, you send your kid to a university and it's their job to turn him into,
which is such a cop-out. Such a cop-out.
You're still his parents, so I know you can't control him at all times when he's in a different city, but the fact that there was just no one like watching over this kid or what he did is just, and I mean, he had the weight of a university in a town on his shoulders, and giving him stuff and letting him do whatever he wanted, and it was just tough to watch for that.
It's also insane to me that he only got suspended for 30 minutes of football. Like, if you want to talk about people not vetting for their job, how did the NCAA let this happen?
Again, I don't think they care. Like, I think they only cared because other people started bringing it up. Like, oh, well, we investigated it and didn't really find too much wrong because he's like the current face of college football.
I don't know if it was they didn't care as much as there was a lot they couldn't prove because there was no like you said, he had $100,000 stuffed into his mattress. It wasn't like this money was all in a bank somewhere.
There was no paper trail.
There was no paper trail, and like people had pictures of him signing autographs, but like they said in the doc, it's not illegal to do that. Like they literally could not get any like hard evidence against him, and it felt like suspending him for half a game was like their way of saying like, we know you're doing something wrong here, but we can't necessarily prove it. So.
Well, and I thought this at the time. It's crazy that like you say that you can prove that he violated rules, but if these rules are the same, then it's got to be way more than 30 minutes of week 0 football.
Yeah.
Like even the Ohio State fellas, with the Jim Tressel era, I mean, those guys got the hammer laid on them. So it's like, was Johnny just that? Was he just able to skirt past the NCAA? And just sheer incompetence on their end, or like did these guys in Ohio State just not try to cover their tracks whatsoever?
And a lot of it was probably that where, they were buying stuff that, a normal 19-year-old kid who's poor shouldn't have, like, they had stuff that they shouldn't have had. Whereas Johnny was literally just using that money to party. And, once he started traveling, I thought was weird. But I think it all comes back to that his family was wealthy defense. So they're like, oh, if his family's wealthy and he's doing all this, it's like, it's probably fine. He's probably not doing anything wrong. Like, where you had courtside seats to NBA games, and it's like 2 of those seats are $30,000+. Where
The Super Bowl 50-yard
going,
line.
yeah, like that's what's crazy to me is like there were definitely signs of them doing stuff wrong there. So the fact that they couldn't prove it is either they're bad at their job or Johnny Manziel and company were just great liars.
Yeah, and I was thinking during like the documentary, I was like, damn, I don't remember like half this shit that happened. Like that happened when we were in high school. Like I still don't really remember everything that went on, which is crazy to me. Like I don't even remember that happening.
I remember some of it, but not like to the extent that they laid out in the doc. Like,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I remember some of the stuff like him getting kicked out of the Manning Passing Academy and all these like weird or not weird, they're very accurate and telling allegations and stuff. But yeah, the documentary just exposed so much more than what was led on, which is insane. Because I remember thinking at the time, like, that's out of control. Like,
yeah.
he just won the Heisman Trophy. Now he can't stay as a coach at a passing camp.
Yeah, it was tough to watch because you could see him going off the rails that entire time. But at the same time, you give a 19-year-old kid a bunch of money, a Heisman Trophy, a town that'll let him do whatever he wants, a coaching staff that'll let him do whatever he wants.
Bunch of enablers, yeah.
Yeah. It's like you could almost see it coming where he was just going to spiral out of control.
Certainly the signs were pointing towards destruction where it ended up going. But the interesting thing is, like, what if he pulls it off? Like, what if he's just so generationally talented that he can watch 0.0 hours of film outside the facility and party on Saturday night in Vegas and fly back into Cleveland for his football game on Sunday and tear up defenses? Like, what if he does? Like, he's just such a different breed of quarterback that we didn't see ever. That was so entertaining. What if he does it?
And here's the thing about that is people forget how bad the Browns were back then. So, like, his flaws obviously got shined through more than if, like, he had a good team around him. Where, like, the Browns were in some of those games that he played in. If they had, like, any semblance of a roster around him where it might have lasted for a little bit longer. But like he said, like, there was no shot he was going to last in the league doing what he did. But also, the Browns roster was bad. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough spot for him to end up at, just with, it's just that whole organization. It feels like a match made in heaven, to be honest, with the amount of self-sabotage going on. But, man, how fun would it have been if he would have pulled it off? If he would have been just fine.
I know Jerry Jones was sitting there at 16 itching to take him.
Do you think
they took a Hall of Fame offensive lineman, which good on them?
I mean, yeah. Well, of course, because everybody else in the room was like, "No, Jerry, we're not drafting Johnny Manziel, you old crazy kook."
Yeah.
Do you think that things would have been? I can't imagine things would have been different if he had ended up in Dallas. Probably worse.
I think if he just tried even a little bit, I think it would have been better. I think so, because I do think that he's a talented fella. You gotta try. Like, it's a different beast coming to the NFL. Like, it's not other 18, 19, 20-year-olds that you're playing against. These guys are grown men that have been doing this for a long time for a lot of them. Like, it's not the same.
Yeah, and that's the magic question, I think, with the whole Johnny Manziel era is, how close was he to really being like a functional NFL quarterback? Like, because obviously if he had like dove in and dedicated like a lot of these top guys like Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and just really became a a student of the game and put in all that extra work, I think it's pretty clear that he would have been just fine and really good. But like that's not him. That's clearly not him. So like where's that line? Like how much like if you'd watched like a little bit of film or I just didn't go to Vegas all the time during the season, is he competent then? Like what does that line look like?
Well, playing in the NFL is so demanding as far as time constraints. Like he had to have been spending 12 hours a day, at the Brown facility, and then wanting to go party at night. So, in my mind, I feel like he was probably, as a human being, just after partying so much and being on the go with all that stuff, just run down. Where he probably just tired, and
Yeah.
like you said, he lost his love for the game and wanting to do it. And if you don't love that shit, then it was never going to work.
Yeah, it's a wrap.
Yeah, I'm going to say he had no chance. I'm going to say he had no chance to be one of the greats. Because the reason that these guys are so great is because they put in the time. And if he's not willing to do so, then I'm going to say absolutely no shot. Johnny Manziel is ass, and we're going to move on.
Well,
Sure.
Well, let me rephrase, Tyler. What if okay, so obviously Johnny, as his college career played out, was burnt out and had no chance of becoming a competent NFL quarterback. What if he had just had like one positive influence during his time at Texas A&M, or what has to change during college to hold him accountable enough to where he does put in extra work at some point or focuses on football in some way, shape, or form? Like, what does that look like? How close was his college career from staying on the rails and keeping him on a track to being an NFL quarterback?
He would have had to go to a different school. I think if he ends up at Texas, I think his career is way different. Maybe it's not even as good, but he's at least maybe still playing. I mean, maybe not as good as he was in college, but I think he'd still be playing because he has that discipline. I keep going back to thinking about the staff that he had at Texas A&M and just how much they were enabling him. Like Cliff Kingsbury was giggling, like, "Oh yeah, we just let him do whatever the hell he wanted, and as long as he shows up on Saturday, like, okay, yeah, this is funny." Helped a man that could have been awesome at football just pretty much ruin his life. And that's not all Cliff Kingsbury's fault because obviously Johnny Manziel did it. But as a young man, handling fame is probably not easy. Cliff Kingsbury and Sullivan. What's Sumner?
Sumlin
did not help.
Yeah, no accountability. Yeah, and that's I feel like just hearing those guys talk about Johnny, and we heard more from Cliff Kingsbury in the documentary, it seems like they kind of just fell ass backwards into having this crazy talented quarterback. We don't want to get in the way of this. We have jobs on the line. We have our own mouths to feed. We got all this pressure going to the SEC. Yeah, let him do whatever he wants. So this is the edge, but no accountability,
and that's what I was going to say about it, where it felt like those coaches put wins and their job security ahead of like laying down the law for Johnny. Because to what Tyler said, if he goes to a different school like Texas, who's a little more established, or maybe not even Texas, like with a coaching staff that's more established and firm on the rules, maybe he sits out a year, maybe he redshirts that year and grows up and learns how to do things the right way before he gets on the field. And that talk about him being a good NFL quarterback gets interesting. But it was very telling that Sumlin wasn't on that documentary a whole lot because it felt like there was some stuff getting swept under the rug.
For sure. Well, perfect. I mean, like I said, Johnny Manziel is probably my favorite college football player I've ever seen. Just such an electric football player. Wish it would have worked out in the NFL, but it is what it is. It seems like he's doing better now, maybe. So that's good. So back to college football and college football that's happening now, not 10 years ago. the latest thing that I saw on Twitter going around as far as like changes in college football and realignments. I've seen a couple of relegation systems thrown out there where like obviously the networks only want the big brands and are only focused on kind of conglomerating these giant national brands into one super conference, and then a lot of these smaller schools are getting left out. So relegation seems like kind of an opportunity. There's an opportunity for it in the same way that well, if you earn your way into to the top league, then there's an opportunity for you. Um, but so I came up with my own relegation theory here. So
Oh,
Commissioner Shanahan, they didn't like my first theory of conference realignment and all that. So I put together a relegation slideshow here, very in depth. And I think if there's certain things that have to go right with relegation, if it's going to be be applicable and be successful. Real quick, have you guys seen anything about relegation and could it work in college football?
I haven't seen too much about it yet. I get the thought process of it, like Trev Alberts was alluding to with top 35 to 40 brands, kind of forming their own super league, if you will. But other than that, I don't know a ton about it yet.
yeah, and I haven't heard anything about it either.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Saturday night. I didn't get any sleep. I was just thinking about this, and then the first challenge to making that work is how do you structure the conferences? So here's how I did it, and the numbers are kind of fudgy here, but 4 regional conferences: East, West, South, Midwest, and North. 10 in the promoted division, 25 in the relegated division. So you get 10, basically 40 teams to the power of college football programs, um, based on recent success. And so here's how I kind of have it broken down. Like I said, the numbers don't really add up now because there's not enough football teams in FBS. So we're probably gonna have to upgrade some teams from the FCS. The Dakotas are probably one of the first places I'm mining. We have some room out west for some of those schools in California to kind of jump on, but I kind of wanted to separate it by recruiting hub. So we obviously got California and Arizona out west. I wanted a conference that can really kind of focus in on recruiting Texas and Louisiana. Then down south with Florida, Alabama, Georgia, and then up north, getting all the Michigan and Ohio recruits, and close enough to the other hubs down south and Texas to kind of fill in the gaps there. It's tricky because it's a lot of weird matchups here, with a lot of the Big 12 and then LSU and then Arkansas and then Iowa and then SEC gets split up a little bit there. A lot of the Pac-12 teams out west, but this is how I kind of structured it. I want it to be as regional as possible because that's to me a lot more objective. You kind of don't have to pick apart a lot, which I feel like this is going to be the trickiest thing is how do we get this started? Um, and from there, the regular season is kind of how things get underway. So here's how I broke down like the 4 conferences on who, based on recent success, would be the first step in these 4 conferences. You get 10 games in the regular season, 1 predetermined non-conference game, 9 conference games, and similar to my last idea, you get a predetermined game based on where you finished the previous season. So first place in the West plays first team in the South, third place plays third place, and then they rotate conferences on a yearly basis. But I'm really excited about this one because with only 9 conference games to go off of, every game matters so much. And I think that's the real value in relegation is that from all 40 of these teams, every single week feels like a must win. And every game has so much weight to it. And I think that's the value in this system.
So I have a couple thoughts.
Yeah.
And maybe you get into this a little bit more, but when you first brought that idea up, I was thinking So this is the issue with my thought is you have to say, okay, the SEC is number one, Big Ten is number two, Pac-12 is number three, things like that. But then the bottom two and the SEC gets moved to the Pac-10 or the Big Ten, and the bottom two and the Big Ten gets moved to the Pac-12, and do it that way. But again, you'd have to find a way to order all of these conferences and which one's going to be number one, number two, number three. So that's what my thought was when you initially brought this up.
Well, in the Premier League is and European soccer is kind of where relegation is thriving the most, and there's like 10 different leagues that you promote up into from year to year, and I it just seems very messy, and it seems like a lot of good teams can get lost in the fold and kind of stuck there for a while. Where like if you're 4 leagues down, you have to win championships 3 consecutive seasons just to make it to where you're competing at the top level. So it feels like the gap in college football can get really extended really quickly, and I can kind of to where I think that we're heading now is a college football infrastructure where you're just losing so many good brands because they're not of national prominence and they're not fitting the mold for these major networks. Where I feel like this and we'll talk more about relegation and promotion here shortly, but it gives every team an opportunity every season to at least within a 2-year cycle, accomplish anything that they could possibly imagine.
Yeah,
I think
that makes sense.
I think it's just tougher for the smaller schools with limited resources and money at their disposal to be relevant. And I guess that's a part of it. You know, it is what it is. But for example, this year, Tulane has a lot coming back from a team that won, what was it, a New Year's Six game? I forget.
Yep.
They beat USC.
Yep, and Cotton Bowl.
In the Cotton Bowl, yeah. And they're going to be good again this year, but how long does their program and situation allow them to stay relevant? I don't know. It's a lot to think about, but I think about the smaller schools kind of getting lost in the shuffle, and I think that's what makes college football great is you see teams like Georgia Southern jumping up and biting schools like Nebraska every once in a while, and that's what I like seeing because there's just the unpredictability of it.
Absolutely. And this isn't that there's going to be a lot of financial benefit for the teams at the very top of the echelon of college football. And we'll talk numbers here shortly and just how crazy those numbers can get just on current configurations. But I also wanted to make sure that it's very accessible for the smaller schools to not only get, and I think they get more money now. I'm not too familiar with what kind of money they're bringing in TV wise now, but they're going to be in pretty good shapes. And at any given year, they can get promoted. And then all of a sudden, their money more than doubles on a year to year basis. And I added some guardrails to kind of keep them from just being one and done. So we'll get into that here as well. But I definitely had a lot of the little schools in mind. And I think that's why this system is tricky because it would be easy for a lot of those smaller schools to get left in the dust here. But for those relegated conferences or for the relegated division within the conferences, their whole objective is to win the conference. So they get 12 games, all conference games. They a lot of other leagues will do like you get the Premier League, and then you get the League One, and you want to win the League One championship where you beat all. I don't care about that. I care about giving all of these 25 teams an opportunity to get promoted, and I think that the clearest way for that is to be, in theory, the 10th or the 11th best team in the conference. So then you get teams like Tulane here. They have an opportunity this year in this setup to beat up on some of these lower brands and get some momentum. And then they make the conference playoffs there. Now the postseason is the next step here. Since they only get 10 regular season games, it gives us a lot of flexibility to add more postseason games, which I think makes college football better. So the top 4 teams in each conference will play a single elimination playoff for the conference championship game. And then the winner of each conference will advance to the national playoff, and then that's how we crown a national champion. And we'll get into that here shortly. But in this Midwest division, just picking those 4 teams because they're next to each other, they qualify for the conference championship. They play each other, so on and so forth, and they're incentivized financially to make this round in the playoffs, as we'll get into later with revenue disbursement. And same thing for the relegated division. So you get the top 4 teams. They play a 14 playoff. Winner of this tournament wins the division, and that's where we get into relegation and promotion. So after the 4, we determine the 4 conference champion qualifiers. And then the bottom 2 teams play 1 game. Winner takes all. Winner stays in the promoted league. The loser drops down to the relegation. And so it's the 2 lowest ranked eligible teams for promotion. And I throw in that caveat because I also have it stated that if you qualify for the conference championship tournament like these 4 teams do, then the next season, or no, if you make the conference championship, then you are ineligible for relegation the next year. So if you're like a middle of the road team, kind of in this average tier here, because I don't want to reward mediocrity by any means, but if one of these teams pops off one year, makes the playoffs, makes the conference championship, they now know, okay, well, now we have at least another year. If we need to replace a quarterback or a coach, we have some time before things could get bad. And then the loser of that game gets relegated. And then promotion, same kind of thing. So the winner of the lower division now gets promoted. So let's say Iowa State wins that 14 playoff with A&M, Purdue, and Nebraska. They are elevated, and then Arkansas loses, so they are demoted. And I like this system because it puts a lot of pressure on these four teams here. Because let's say that Arkansas and Iowa finish last place in the standings, but Iowa was in the conference championship game a year ago. Now all of a sudden Oklahoma's in the relegation game. Or let's say Oklahoma was also in the conference championship game last year. Well, now Texas is going from maybe a game or 2 away from making the playoffs to now possibly fighting for their spot in the promoted league. So that kind of gives some pressure to those middling teams. And then you're also ineligible for relegation your first year after promotion. So Iowa State wins that relegated division. They get at least 2 full seasons in the promoted team to collect that revenue, to kind of cash in on that momentum. And if they do have a year like Tulane had this year, where they pop off and they have a great team, now all of a sudden they secure their future for the next 2 years. So it gives them an opportunity not just to get promoted and kind of collect this revenue and prominence, but also hopefully giving them an opportunity to stay there.
And my only question with that is, with the age of the transfer portal and being able to move schools willy-nilly, is kind of like the Joe Burrow LSU team. Say LSU's in that middle tier system, like Iowa State it was in before they won. What if they are the best? I guess it just leaves the door open. What if we're missing out on the best team that year not being in the highest league because teams before them were not as good, is my only thought. Especially with kids being able to leave whenever they want to go to new school.
I think you certainly risk that. It's never possible to in this kind of system to give everybody a chance to win a national championship on a year-to-year basis. I would say to combat that, I think even that first year with Joe Burrow, if they were in like the relegated division, you hope that he gives them an opportunity to get promoted. And then even if that second year where he pops off, wins the Heisman Trophy, he's the best player in the country. Even if they can't win a national championship and cash in on that, even if they get promoted, that's still possibly a program changing event where you have an opportunity to build and yeah, they don't have the prominence of winning a national championship in that scenario, but he still leaves the program way better off than when he found it.
That's a good point.
Dude, your brain is crazy.
Oh, I mean, if you think this is crazy, I break down all the revenue sharing. We're just getting started.
Oh my
This
god.
is, I mean, this is nuts.
Yeah, strap in. So the financial split. So the TV revenue is pulled in before the season. So you take this big pile of money, and then right away you split it into 90%. So you get 10%, you put that away for later. You got 90% here. You give 45% to each division. So you give 45% of it to the promoted division, 45% to the relegated division. The payout up here is bigger because there's less mouths to feed, less ways to split it. So that's where that becomes more profitable. And then 5% of the 10% that we saved earlier is divided between the 4 schools who qualify for the conference championship tournaments. So you get a bonus just for being in the top 4 of the promoted division. And then the other 5% after that is then split upon the pulled together and split up. So 2.5% of the total revenue goes to each team who qualifies for the promoted division the next season. I wanted to include this because I also wanted to give a bonus to the promoted team who didn't collect the big revenue share last year. So they get a couple extra $1 million here to help get their new life in the promoted division started. And then the final 2.5% will be pooled up and paid out to the teams who qualify for the national playoff. So you get a bonus for winning your conference in addition to the bonus that you got for qualifying. Then you get a bonus for each victory after that. So hypothetically, what does that look like? We're talking about percentages and pie and money. So the Big Ten deal, the new Big Ten deal gives out a $1.1 billion per year, and that's just for the Big Ten. So I believe that all the other teams could scrounge up another $2.9 billion. So each conference gets a share of that. They get $1 billion each of the TV deal. Hold on here. So they get $1 billion. So that's what we're starting off with. $1 billion, like I said, it splits off 90%, 45% for each division. So that comes out to $45 million per team in the promoted division. So right about where a lot of these teams are averaging payouts now, just for qualifying for this promoted division. And then the relegated division gets about $18 million per team. And then that, like I said, that 5% splits upon the playoff teams in the conference. So if you qualify for your conference championship tournament, you get another $12.5 million. All of a sudden, that $45 million turns into $57 million. That's not a bad payday. Then that other 2.5% that I want to give as a bonus to each conference team for the next year. Every team who qualifies for the promoted division next year gets $2.5 million. So on top of whatever money you collected earlier, you also have some money now in your pocket to go and spring off operation going towards the next year. Then we have 2.5% remaining for each conference, so $25 million of the initial revenue share. All 4 conferences pulled together that final $25 million, and we have a bonus pool of $100 million to split upon these 4 teams. So in that regard, each qualifying team, each conference champion team gets $10 million just for winning their conference. And then the winner of the semifinal games wins a $20 million payout. And then the winner of the national championship game gets another $20 million. So what does that look like? So the national champion will take home $110 million. So mighty big incentive to be the best team in the country. The runner-up gets $90 million. Semifinal losers get $70 million. 2 through 4 in the conference get $60 million. Non-relegated conference teams, so 9 teams in the promoted division, will get $47.5 million. The relegated conference champion or the conference team gets $45 million. The promoted conference team and the relegated division champion gets $20 million per year, and then the non-promoted teams in the relegated division get $18 million. How does that sound, fellas?
It's a pretty specific breakdown. I like it.
I would say to anybody listening, just please watch the YouTube because
I mean, you got to. There's no way to follow along with all that rambling.
Brandon has a very in-depth slideshow. If you're lost like me, I would do that because my goodness.
I'm a visual learner too, so I can only imagine if you're not watching with these visual aids.
It's just me spitting out rap god numbers.
Okay, so I have something here, right? So last year, Alabama football brought in almost $131 million last year.
Where does that money come from?
Just the revenue for the football team. I'm not sure exactly. I don't have the breakdown in front of me. I can look for that.
So these figures that we have in front of us here, this is just TV revenue. So it doesn't include like ticket sales, merch. So there's obviously an opportunity to make more than what's stated here. But as far as just dishing out TV money that in theory all the college football teams would bring into the table, this is where that pie gets split up into.
That makes sense.
So instead of the Big Ten conference teams getting $70 million a year and the Big 12 teams getting $30 million a year, it kind of divvies out that money a little bit more evenly. And then if you're a network paying these big dollars for teams, you're getting the best of the best. You're getting the biggest brands are always going to rise to the top. That's how it's always been. That's how it always will be. And then if nothing else, you're going to fall back to the best football teams. So we're going to give you the best product. So it doesn't seem like there's much of a downside from a network perspective as far as blindly giving the Commissioner Shanahan's organization $1 billion to broadcast their games, as opposed to picking and choosing which conference you get and which games or so on and so forth.
My only thing is like these teams are just going to be top loaded, right? The top teams are always going to get the best recruits, because why would anybody go anywhere else? These teams are going to stay on top for a long time. Because right now, the way that it is, there's a chance. I mean, albeit a small chance for a lot of the teams, but there's always a chance for them to make some waves. And like last year, TCU making a national championship game, like it's a good idea in theory. There's just a lot more, I think, that goes into college football as a whole and keeping it competitive league wide rather than having to worry about relegation and stuff.
And this is just like for the TV money breakdown. Like obviously there's still revenue, like selling out your stadium or like merchandise. I'm sure that goes into it. I don't know. This is just a breakdown of the TV money, correct? What you would receive?
Yeah. Plus, all the teams that are already massively in debt, like then they're just pretty much dead.
Oh, they better get to fucking practice then,
I guess.
I feel like this would really force universities to take a good hard look at like the coaches they're hiring and experienced program builders and coaches that can keep you at that upper echelon would be in like a way higher demand. Like not even necessarily like the Nick Sabans and the Kirby Smarts of the world. I'm thinking more of like the Kirk Ferentz, the Bo Pellinis, the guys that just win 8-9 games every year. Just crank them out.
Because you can't get that wrong. Because I don't know if you guys noticed it when I was speeding through this PowerPoint presentation. Nebraska is not in the promoted division.
No,
they botched a couple of coaching hires, and now they have to facing $18 million a year in revenue, and they're fighting to get back. So you can't get that wrong.
Yeah. I feel like coaches would love this because if you could prove that you could win 8-9 games a year and stay in that top conference, like you would have the ultimate job security. Because,
Yeah, and I think that they would be talking a whole lot differently about Ryan Day than they are now.
yeah.
Oh, without a
Oh,
doubt.
you can't win the big one. You can't win the big one. Well, he's keeping you
Ryan
where
Day
you are.
also lucked into just a great situation. So
They're
Yeah, I
still
think,
there, though. They're still
think-
there. There's something to be said about that.
yeah, Jim Harbaugh put it. Well, some of us aren't born on third base here.
Yeah,
I think that was very accurate. Just because you're sitting there on third base.
Yeah, it still takes a lot to stay there, though, I think.
For sure. But yeah, I mean that's the stakes. There is an opportunity because nobody knows how this would actually play out in reality. Because I think one of the unintended consequences with the 14 college football playoff is that there's just such a regularity in teams now who are good enough to make it on a year-to-year basis that the gap's gotten so big between second place team in the Big Ten and the third place team in the Big Ten. And I think we're getting that way in the SEC. The Pac-12 and Big 12 aren't like that. That's why they're my favorite conferences. But and this could absolutely happen because if you're giving one team $110 million and teams in that same conference are getting $45 million a year, that could absolutely create a gap that's really hard to overcome. But then, like Tyler pointed out, a team like TCU this year who just has this random collection of developed NFL talent and a new offensive coach who can win close games and gets them there. All of a sudden, they're cashing a $90 million check, and they're in such a better spot than they were a year ago. So in the brightest timeline, it opens up that opportunity more often than it closes it. But that's certainly one of the risks of a system like this, where you're disparaging funds so disproportionately to success.
Also, real quick, while we're talking about it, I didn't even think about this aspect. When you are in that top conference, there aren't like cakewalks anymore. Like you're not playing UNLV, Colorado State. So I feel like it would weed out the coaches, that aren't, great. So like we really would find out if Ryan Day and Kirk Ferentz are good, because a lot of those like 8-9 win seasons and are, they're beating up on the Indianas, the Rutgers of the world, and I guess we would find out who can really coach against top talent consistently.
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at this conference, these are your 9 conference opponents. If you're in any one of these teams, and you also know that every single week, the weight of your entire program could be in the balance, especially if you're a middling team like in this graphic. That there's no real characterization to this graphic, but if you're Texas Tech in Texas, you go into to week 10 and you're sitting where you're sitting, a loss could put you in a horrible spot. Or if you're Oklahoma State and Texas, you're just one win away from another $12 million check, and then an opportunity to compete for a conference championship, and everything's in your hands. So there's no voting system, there's no committee picking your fate. It's all in your hands, which I think at the end of the day is good. But yeah, like you said, every game matters so much, and you're playing great competition who's also desperate on a week in, week out basis.
Yeah, I think this would be great for the fan, but I don't see this logistically happening because of the teams that are getting all this money. And like, yeah, there's a chance that you make more, but there's more of a chance to not. So I doubt that any team would willingly let this happen. Like a lot of teams would willingly let this happen.
For sure. And yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, if I'm ever elected commissioner of college football, it's because all the suits have ruined the game, and they need me to come in and fix it. But until that happens, financially, everybody's going to look out for the best. And the Big Ten teams, they're already locking in a super lucrative deal with Fox, so they're already getting $70 million a year. Why would I risk, based on a poor season? Why would I risk all that revenue coming in? So it would never happen, but it is fun to play pretend.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. Not to put down all your ideas, but this is a far out idea, Brandon.
I mean, it is blowing everything up, which I think is fun to tinker around with, and I hope if we ever do get a college football game that there's an opportunity to really get creative with stuff like this.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine how much work went into this, but this was awesome.